The Great Hall of the Galactic Council Station was the most beautiful place Qiu-min had ever seen. The walls were made of crystal that showed the stars beyond, and soft blue light filled the room. As the human ambassador to the Alterian Federation, he had spent 3 years trying to understand this peaceful place. The aliens here had built a perfect society without war, without violence, without the need for weapons. Qiu-min sat at his desk, reading reports from Earth, when the emergency signal started flashing. Red lights blinked across his screen, and he heard the sharp sound that meant urgent news. He pressed the button to answer. "Ambassador Qiu-min here," he said. The face of Admiral Sora appeared on his screen. She looked tired, and her dark hair was pulled back in a tight knot. Behind her, Qiu-min could see the bridge of her ship, with officers moving quickly between control stations. "Qiu-min, we need to talk," Sora said. "The situation has changed. The Void Swarm is moving faster than we thought." Qiu-min felt his stomach drop. The Void Swarm was something from nightmares. These creatures came from the dark spaces between stars, eating everything they found. They had already destroyed 12 human colonies on the outer rim. "How bad is it?" Qiu-min asked. "Bad. They're heading toward the core worlds now. Our scouts report at least 3,000 ships, maybe more. They'll reach Alterian space in 6 days. Sora leaned forward. "We want to help. The Terran Defense Fleet is ready to move. We have 200 battleships, 500 destroyers, and enough firepower to stop this threat." Qiu-min closed his eyes. He knew what the answer would be, but he had to try. "I'll talk to the council." 2 hours later, Qiu-min stood in the council chamber. The room was huge, with seats for representatives from 47 different species. In the center sat Council Prime Wei Jun, an Alterian with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. Around him were the other council members, beings of peace who had never known war. "Honored Council," Qiu-min began, "Earth offers military assistance against the Void Swarm. Our fleet is ready to help defend your worlds." The chamber fell silent. Wei Jun looked uncomfortable, his long fingers moving nervously on his desk. Finally, he spoke. "Ambassador Qiu-min, we appreciate Earth's concern, but we cannot accept this offer." "Why not?" Qiu-min asked, though he already knew. Representative Hisu from the Centauri Union stood up. She was tall and thin, with silver, skin that sparkled in the light. "Because humans use violence. We have heard stories about your wars, your weapons. Such things have no place in civilized space." "But the swarm doesn't care about civilization," Qiu-min said. "They don't talk. They don't negotiate. They just consume everything." Wei Jun shook his head. "There must be another way. We have our energy shields, our harmony fields. We can find a peaceful solution." Qiu-min looked around the room. These beings had lived in peace for so long they had forgotten what real danger looked like. Their ships had no weapons except devices that created pretty light shows. Their armies were actually groups of social workers who helped solve problems with talking. "What, if they don't want to talk?" Qiu-min asked. Representative Jung-Soo from the Vegan Alliance laughed softly. "Everything wants to talk, Ambassador. Communication is the basis of all life. Even the most primitive species can be reasoned with." Qiu-min thought about the reports from the outer rim. Entire planets stripped bare. Billions of people simply gone. The swarm didn't leave messages or demands. They just ate everything and moved on. "I urge you to reconsider," Qiu-min said. My people have experience with this kind of threat. Yes, said Representative Mi Young from the Tau Ceti Collective. We know about human experience with threats. You solve everything by breaking it. The council members nodded in agreement. They had heard stories about human history, wars that lasted years, weapons that could destroy planets, soldiers who fought even when they knew they would die. To these peaceful beings, such things seemed like madness. Wei Jun stood up, his robes flowing around him like water. The Galactic Council votes to decline Earth's offer. We will face this challenge with wisdom and compassion, as we always have. The vote was 45-2. Only Q Min and Representative J Ho from the Proxima Colony voted to accept human help. The session ended, and the representatives filed out, talking quietly among themselves about peaceful solutions and harmonious responses. Q Min stayed in his seat, watching the stars through the crystal walls. He thought about Sora and her fleet, waiting at the edge of human space for orders that would never come. He thought about the swarm, moving through space like a cancer, getting closer every hour. His communication device buzzed. It was a message from Wei Jun. Ambassador, please understand our position. We are not warriors. We build, we create, we find beauty in the universe. Violence is the opposite of everything we believe. Q Min typed back, I understand. But what do you do when beauty itself is under attack? There was no answer. That night, Q Min sat in his quarters, looking out at the peaceful station. Alien families walked through the gardens below, their children playing games that had no winners or losers. Art displays showed the history of the galaxy, millions of years of progress, science, and peace. He opened a secure channel to Earth and sent a message to Sora. Council says no. They think they can talk to the swarm. The answer came back quickly. Then we wait. When they change their minds, we'll be ready. Q Min hoped they would change their minds in time. He had seen human soldiers fight. He had watched human ships in battle. It was terrible and beautiful, and nothing like what these peaceful aliens could imagine. But he also knew that sometimes terrible things were necessary to protect beautiful ones. 3 days later, the first reports came in. The void swarm had reached the outer colonies. The peaceful aliens who lived there had tried to communicate, just as the council ordered. They sent messages of welcome and friendship. They offered gifts and knowledge. The swarm ate them all. Q Min received the emergency. Reports in his office. Kepler 442b was gone. New Geneva was under attack. The mining stations around Wolf 359 had gone silent. He looked at the latest message from the council. Continue attempts at peaceful contact. Violence is not the answer. Q Min closed the message and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm was getting closer. And somewhere else, Sora's fleet was waiting for a call that might never come. He hoped the council would realize their mistake before it was too late. Because if they didn't, all their beauty and peace and wisdom would be nothing but food for the darkness between the stars. Captain Hyojin had never seen anything like it before. From the bridge of the Alterian cruiser, Serenity's Light, she watched the void swarm approach Kepler 442b. The planet below was home to 2.3 million people, miners, farmers, and their families, who had built a peaceful life on this quiet world. The swarm ships looked wrong. They were not built like normal spacecraft. Instead of metal and circuits, they seemed to be made of dark, living tissue. They moved like sea creatures bending and flowing through space. Some were as small as fighters, others as large as cities. They all had the same horrible purpose. Captain, said her communications officer, Taemin. "We're getting signals from the planet. They're trying to talk to the swarm." Hyejin nodded. This was what the Galactic Council had ordered. Make contact. Find a peaceful solution. She had her doubts, but orders were orders. "Put the planetary transmission on speakers," she said. The voice of Governor So Young filled the bridge. She sounded calm and hopeful, the way Altarians always did when meeting new species. "Unknown vessels, this is Governor So Young of Kepler 442b. We welcome you to our system. We come in peace and friendship. Please respond so we can begin proper first contact procedures." Hyejin waited. Around her, the bridge crew watched their screens, hoping to see some sign that the swarm would answer. Minutes passed. The dark ships continued moving toward the planet, ignoring all attempts at communication. "Try again," Hyejin ordered. "Attention, unknown fleet," Governor So Young's voice came again. "We have many gifts to offer: art, music, knowledge, and friendship. We wish to learn about your culture and share our own. Please let us talk." Still, no answer. The swarm ships were getting closer now, and Hyejin could see smaller vessels breaking away from the main fleet. They moved like insects, swarming around the planet's outer defenses. "Captain," called her science officer, Jin Woo, "I'm reading strange energy patterns from those ships. It's not like any technology we know." "What kind of patterns?" "Biological. It's like they're alive, but also machines. I don't understand it." Hyejin felt cold fear in her stomach. She had read the reports from human space, but seeing it herself was different. These weren't ships in any normal sense. They were predators. "All ships, raise harmony shields," she ordered. "Prepare peaceful contact protocols." The Altarian fleet had 12 ships, cruisers and destroyers designed for exploration and diplomacy. Their weapons were energy dampeners that could disable hostile systems without causing harm. Their shields created fields of harmonious energy. That was supposed to calm aggressive species. It didn't work. The first swarm ship to reach the planet's atmosphere didn't slow down or try to land. It simply crashed into the surface and began to spread. Within minutes, dark tendrils were growing across the continent, consuming everything they touched. "Governor So Young, get your people to the evacuation ships," Hyejin called. "We're trying," came the panicked reply. "But there's something wrong. The transports won't start. None of our technology is working properly." On the main screen, Hyejin watched in horror as more swarm ships landed. They weren't really landing. They were melting into the planet itself, becoming part of it. Where they touched, the green forests and blue oceans turned black and lifeless. "Captain," Taemin said, his voice shaking, "I'm picking up transmissions from the surface. The people, they're screaming." "Block those signals," Hyejin ordered quickly. Her crew didn't need to hear that. A group of swarm ships turned toward the Altarian fleet. They moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. In seconds, they were among the peaceful vessels. "Fire energy dampeners," Hyejin commanded. Her ship's weapons fired beams of soft blue light at the nearest swarm vessel. The beams were designed to overload computer systems and force ships to shut down safely. They had worked on every species the Altarians had ever met. The swarm ship absorbed the energy and kept coming. "Increase power," Hyejin said. They fired, again this time with enough energy to shut down a battleship. The swarm ship seemed to enjoy it, moving faster and growing brighter as it fed on the attack. "Captain, it's not working," Jinwoo shouted. "It's eating our energy." The swarm ship crashed into the destroyer Peace of Mind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the beautiful white hull began to turn black as dark veins spread across its surface. The ship's distress signals cut off as its crew was consumed. "All ships retreat!" Hyejin ordered. But it was too late. The swarm was everywhere now, surrounding the Altarian fleet like hungry animals. Ship after ship fell to the dark vessels. The cruiser Harmony's Dream tried to ram one of the smaller swarm ships, but the alien vessel simply absorbed the impact and consumed the cruiser from the inside out. Hyejin watched her beautiful fleet die. These ships had been built for exploration and wonder, crewed by people who had never imagined such horror could exist. The swarm didn't fight them. It simply ate them. "Captain, we need to go," urged her pilot, Minho. "We can't help them." Hyejin wanted to stay and fight, but she knew it was useless. "Set course for the nearest jump point. Send an emergency signal to the Council." As the Serenity's light fled the system, Hyejin looked back at Kepler 442b. The planet was already half black, its surface covered with the spreading infection of the swarm. Soon there would be nothing left. No people, no cities, no life at all. Of the 12 ships in her fleet, only 3 escaped. 9 beautiful vessels and their crews were gone, consumed by an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be stopped by peaceful means. In her ready room, Hyejin recorded her report for the Council. Her hands shook as she spoke. "Council Prime Wei-jun, this is Captain Hyejin of the Serenity's Light. The peaceful contact mission has failed. The Void Swarm does not communicate. It does not negotiate. It only consumes." She paused, thinking of her lost crews, of the families on Kepler 442b who had died calling for help. "They don't stop," she continued. "They don't listen. They just eat everything. Our harmony fields, our energy dampeners, our diplomatic protocols, none of it matters to them. We lost 9 ships and an entire planet in 3 hours. She ended the recording and sent it on the fastest channel to the Galactic Council. Then she sat in her chair, staring out at the stars, and wondered how many more beautiful worlds would die before the Council understood the truth. The swarm wasn't interested in peace. It was interested in feeding, and unless something changed soon, it would eat the entire galaxy. Fleet Admiral Dongwu stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the star maps update in real time. Red markers showed where the Void Swarm had attacked. Each red dot represented millions of dead aliens and destroyed worlds. The pattern was clear. The swarm was moving toward the heart of the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. "Sir," called Commander Hei-Wan from her communication station. "Incoming priority message from Ambassador Q-Min." "Put it through." Q-Min's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and worried, but there was hope in his eyes. "Admiral, the Galactic Council has changed their minds. They're asking for our help." Dongwu nodded grimly. He had been expecting this call since the first reports came in. "What changed their minds?" "They lost 3 planets in 2 days. The aliens finally understand that you can't negotiate with the swarm." "How long do we have?" "The swarm will reach the core worlds in 4 days." "Maybe less." Dongwu turned to his staff officers. These men and women had been preparing for this moment since the first swarm attack in human space 6 months ago. They knew what needed to be done. "Activate protocol." 7, he ordered. "Full fleet deployment. This is not a drill." Across the solar system, alarm signals started sounding. On Mars, the shipyards began loading weapons and supplies onto waiting vessels. In the asteroid belt, mining ships were converted into military transports. On Earth, Families said goodbye to their sons and daughters who served in the space fleet. Captain. Yunseo received the activation order while her ship was docked at Earth Station 3. The TDF Soul's hammer was a dreadnought, 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. She had commanded this ship for 5 years, but had never fired its main guns in battle. "All crew to battle stations," she announced over the ship's speakers. "This is what we trained for." Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. Unlike the peaceful aliens, humans had been preparing for war their entire history. Every officer knew their job. Every system had been tested and retested. The ship's weapons were loaded, its armor was strong, and its crew was ready. Commander Jin Ho was loading his destroyer Taekwondo's Edge when the quartermaster brought him the special weapons. Kinetic bombardment platforms, massive metal rods that could be dropped from orbit to destroy targets on planetary surfaces. Each rod weighed 10 tons and hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. "Sir, are we really going to use these?" asked his weapons officer Boram. "If we have to," Jin Ho replied. "The swarm doesn't care about our rules of war. We do what it takes to stop them." The human fleet was different from anything the aliens had ever seen. Where alien ships were smooth and beautiful, human vessels looked like they were built for fighting. They had thick armor plating, multiple weapon systems, and emergency backups for every critical system. They were designed by a species that understood war. Lieutenant Hei-Wan worked at her communication station, translating the increasingly desperate messages from alien space. Each transmission was worse than the last. The Centauri colonies were gone. The Vegan research stations had fallen silent. The beautiful crystal cities of the Tau Ceti Collective were now dark feeding grounds for the swarm. "Admiral," she called to Dongwu, "Captain Hae-Jin of the Alterian Fleet is requesting coordination. Protocols. Her ships want to fight alongside ours." "Tell her we'll be honored to have them," Dongwu replied, "but make sure she understands. When we fight to win. That means some of their ships might not come home." It was something the aliens still didn't understand. Humans accepted that war meant sacrifice. They knew that to save something, you might have to lose something else. It was a lesson learned through thousands of years of conflict. Engineer Minho was checking the reactor systems on the battlecruiser Incheon's Pride when his alien counterpart came to visit. Veltara was a Centauri engineer, tall and graceful with silver skin and large eyes. She had come to learn about human technology. "Your ships are so different," she said, looking at the massive reactor core. "Everything seems designed to break. Things?" "That's because it is," Minho replied. "We build our ships to fight and survive. We can fix them later. But why build them to break things at all? Why not build them to create, to explore, to learn?" Minho looked at her with sad eyes. "Because sometimes, to protect the things that create and explore and learn, you need to be able to break the things that want to destroy them." The human fleet gathered at the edge of their space. Over 800 ships of all sizes. Battleships. With guns that could level mountains, carriers full of fighters designed for space combat, destroyers fast enough to chase down any enemy, supply ships loaded with everything needed for a long campaign. Admiral Dongwu addressed the fleet from his flagship, the massive battleship Earth's Resolve. "People of the Terran Defense Fleet," he began, "today we go to war against an enemy that knows no mercy, feels no fear, and seeks only to consume. The aliens we're helping have never seen real war. They think we're barbaric because we know how to fight." He paused, looking out at the assembled fleet. But we don't fight because we love violence. We fight because we love everything else too much to let it be destroyed. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. The fleet moved out, jumping through hyperspace toward the battle zone. Each ship carried men and women who had volunteered to face the darkness between the stars. They knew some of them wouldn't come home. They knew this fight would be harder than anything they had ever faced. But they also knew that if they didn't fight, there would be no home to return to. In the cold void of space, the human fleet advanced toward its destiny. Behind them was everything they loved. Earth with its blue oceans and green forests, colonies full of families and children, the dreams and hopes of an entire species. Ahead of them was the swarm, hungry and relentless, consuming world after world in its endless feast. The humans were coming to stop it, and they would do whatever it took to win. Ambassador Da Hyun floated in the zero gravity of the meeting chamber, trying to explain human military doctrine to a room full of confused aliens. The joint briefing was taking place aboard the Altarian command ship Wisdom's Light, and the cultural differences were immediately obvious. The alien ship's walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft, peaceful light. Gentle music played in the background, and the air smelled like flowers. The aliens wore flowing robes in bright colors, and they moved with the grace of dancers. The humans wore dark military uniforms with armor plates and communication equipment. Their movements were sharp and efficient. They carried weapons, even, to a peaceful meeting. "Let me explain this again," Da Hyun said patiently. "When we say acceptable losses, we don't mean we want people to die. We mean we understand that in war, some people will die to save many others." Council Prime Wei Jun looked horrified. "But all life is precious. How can you decide that some lives are worth more than others?" Captain So Young of the battleship Busan's Thunder spoke up. "We don't decide that. The enemy does. When the swarm attacks, they make the choice. We just respond," the alien delegates whispered among themselves in their musical languages. To them, the idea of planned sacrifice was incomprehensible. Their species had evolved beyond such concepts millions of years ago. "Perhaps you could show us these weapons you speak of," suggested Representative Jung Min from the Vegan Alliance. "We want to understand what you plan to do." Da Hyun looked at Captain So Young, who nodded. "Very well. Captain, please demonstrate a standard railgun firing procedure." The aliens followed the humans to the observation deck where they could see both fleets arranged in space. The human ships looked brutal compared to the elegant alien vessels. Where the alien ships were smooth curves and flowing lines, the human ships were all angles and armor plating. Captain So Young activated her communication system. "TDF Gwangju's hammer. This is Captain So Young. Please demonstrate railgun firing. Procedure on the target asteroid." In the distance, one of the human destroyers turned toward a small asteroid about the size of a building. The aliens watched through the crystal viewing wall as the ship's main gun rotated to target the space. "Rock. This is just a small rail gun," So Young explained. "It fires a metal projectile at about 10% of light speed." The gun fired. There was no flash of light, no energy beam, no beautiful display. Just a tiny metal slug moving faster than the aliens thought possible. When it hit the asteroid, the rock simply disappeared in a cloud of glowing dust. The aliens stood in shocked silence. "That's a small weapon?" Wei Jun asked in a whisper. "Our destroyers carry 8 of those guns," So Young said. "Our battleships carry guns 50 times more powerful." Representative Hai Young from the Centauri Union looked sick. But the energy required, the destruction. Why would anyone build such things? Engineer Minho stepped forward. He was a small, quiet man who maintained the weapon systems on human ships. Because sometimes you need to break things. And when you need to break something, you want to break it completely. But why break anything at all? Asked Dr. Su Jin, a Tau Ceti scientist. Violence solves nothing. It only creates more violence. Da Hyun looked at these peaceful beings and tried to find words they would understand. Violence doesn't solve everything, he agreed, but some problems can only be solved with violence. The swarm is one of those problems. The aliens struggled to understand. They had been peaceful for so long that they had forgotten what real conflict looked like. Their idea of war was sending strongly worded letters and economic sanctions. How? Can your people live knowing they might be asked to die? Wei Jun asked. Captain Yun Seo of the Dreadnought Soul's Fist answered. Because we also live knowing that our deaths might save others. Every human who serves in the fleet volunteers. No one is forced to fight. But why volunteer for such horror? Because the alternative is worse, Yun Seo said simply. If we don't fight, everyone dies. The alien representative spent hours asking questions that seemed simple to them but were impossible to answer. How could humans live with the knowledge that they might kill others? How could they build weapons designed only for destruction? How could they accept that war was sometimes necessary? Dr. Na Yun, a human psychologist, tried to explain. Your species are lucky. You evolved on peaceful worlds, without predators, without competition for resources. You never needed to learn how to fight. Humans come from a world where everything wanted to kill us, the weather, the animals, each other. We learned to fight because it was the only way to survive. But you've evolved beyond that now, protested Representative Jin Su from the Proxima Collective. You have technology, civilization, art. Why keep the violence? Because civilization is fragile, Da Hyun replied. It exists only because people are willing to defend it. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is what you have when someone is strong enough to protect it. The meeting continued for hours. The aliens asked about human concepts they couldn't understand. Military honor, the warrior's code, the idea of a good death in battle. They were horrified by human ideas about necessary sacrifice and acceptable risk. The humans, in turn, were amazed by the aliens' complete faith in peaceful solutions. These beings honestly believed that every problem could be solved through talking, that violence was never necessary, that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. What will you do if we fail? Asked Captain Tae-hyung of the cruiser Incheon's Hope. What if we can't stop the swarm? Wei-jun looked confused. Fail? How could you fail? You have these terrible weapons, these ships of war. The swarm has consumed entire star systems, Tae-hyung pointed out. They might be stronger than us. The aliens couldn't accept this possibility. In their minds, once the humans had agreed to fight, victory was certain. They couldn't imagine that even violence might not be enough. As the meeting ended, the humans and aliens went back to their separate ships. Both sides were confused by what they had learned. The aliens couldn't understand how beings capable of such violence could also be capable of art, love, and sacrifice. The humans couldn't understand how beings could be so naive about the realities of existence. But despite their differences, both sides knew they had to work together. The swarm was coming, and whether they understood each other or not, they would face it together. In her quarters aboard the Soul's Fist, Captain Yun Seo recorded her thoughts. The aliens think we're monsters because we know how to fight. But they don't understand. We fight so that we don't have to be monsters. We break things so that other things can remain whole. We accept darkness so that others can live in light. She looked out at the alien ships, so beautiful and graceful in the starlight. I hope we can save them. I hope their peace can survive. What's coming? Because if it can't, then all our violence will have been for nothing. The Kepler's gate system had been beautiful once. 3 gas giants with dozens of moons, an asteroid belt rich in minerals, and a hyperspace junction that connected 12 different star systems. Now it was a nightmare of twisted metal and living darkness. Captain Tae-hyung stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser Busan's Fury, watching the tactical display. 3 massive swarm hive ships hung in space like cancerous growths, each one the size of a small moon. Around them, smaller vessels moved in patterns that hurt to look at. Not quite random, but following no logic that human minds could understand. "Sir, we're getting readings from the planet's surface," reported his science officer, Da-young. "The swarm has been here for 6 days. They've changed everything." Tae-hyung could see what she meant through the main viewer. The planet below had once been a thriving mining world with beautiful crystal cities. Now it was covered in dark structures that pulsed with unnatural life. The swarm didn't just consume, it rebuilt everything into copies of itself. Combined. "Fleet status?" he asked. 47 human ships, 18 alien vessels," replied his communications officer Min Jung. "Admiral Dong-woo is commanding from the Earth's resolve. The alien ships are staying in the rear formation as planned." Tae-hyung nodded. The battle plan was simple because it had to be. The aliens still didn't understand human tactics, and humans didn't trust alien technology. Better to keep things clear and straightforward. "Sir," Min Jung called again. "The Altarian command ship is requesting permission to open diplomatic channels with the swarm. Tell them negative. We tried talking 6 months ago. These things don't listen." On the other side of the formation, Captain Hye-jin of the Serenity's Light was arguing with her superiors. She had seen what the swarm could do, but the Galactic Council still hoped for a peaceful solution. "Captain, you must try," insisted Council Prime Wei-jun over the communication channel. "Perhaps if we approach them differently, show them that we mean no harm." "Honored Prime," Hye-jin said as respectfully as she could, "I've fought these things before. They don't want to talk. They want to eat us. But surely there must be some way to communicate. Every species has language, culture, some basis for understanding." Hye-jin watched the swarm ships moving in their impossible patterns. "Sir, I don't think they're really a species anymore. I think they're something else entirely." She was right, though she didn't know it yet. The swarm had once been many different species from the dark spaces between galaxies. But over millions of years, they had merged into something new. Not individuals, but parts of a single hungry intelligence that cared only about growth and consumption. Admiral Dong-woo's voice came over the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Dong-woo. The swarm has established breeding facilities on 3 planets in this system. If we don't stop them here, they'll spread to the core worlds within days." He paused, looking at the tactical display on his flagship. The human ships were formed into attack groups, each one designed to hit the swarm from a different angle. The alien ships hung back, their energy shields raised, still hoping they wouldn't need to fight. "Remember," Dong-woo continued, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every peaceful world. every alien family, every child who's never known war. Today, we show them what humanity can do. The swarm must have detected the fleet's approach because their ships began moving differently. The smaller vessels formed into swarms of their own, while the three hive ships started glowing with dark energy. "Sir," called Lieutenant Bo Young from the sensor station on Tae-hyung's ship, "the swarm is launching attack craft. Thousands of them." Tae-hyung could see them on the main viewer. Small, fast ships that moved like insects, pouring out of the hive ships in endless streams. Each one was about the size of a fighter, but they moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. "All human ships, weapons free," Admiral Dongwu ordered. "Show them how Earth fights." The human fleet opened fire all at once. Railgun rounds streaked across space at impossible speeds. Plasma torpedoes burst in brilliant explosions. Energy beams carved through the darkness like swords of light. The alien observers watched in shock as the humans unleashed weapons they didn't know existed. The peaceful species had energy dampeners and harmony fields. The humans had gravity bombs, fusion missiles, and kinetic weapons that could punch through planets. The first wave of swarm fighters hit the human fleet like a living tide. But the humans were ready. Point defense systems tracked and destroyed hundreds of enemies. Fighter squadrons from the human carriers met the swarm in open space, engaging in dogfights that lit up the darkness. Captain So Min of the destroyer Taekwondo's Edge watched her ship's weapons tear through a group of swarm fighters. "These things are fast," she reported, "but they're not as tough as they look." That was the first surprise. For all their horrible appearance, individual swarm units weren't much stronger than normal spacecraft. Their real power came from their numbers and their ability to work together perfectly. The second surprise came when the hive ships started fighting back. Instead of normal weapons, they fired streams of living darkness that seemed to eat light itself. When these beams hit human ships, the hulls didn't just break, they changed, becoming part of the swarm. "The Incheon's pride is hit," reported Min Jung. "Sir, the ship it's changing color." Tae-hyung could see the cruiser on his display. Where the dark beam had touched it, the white hull was turning black. But instead of being consumed like the alien ships, the human vessel fought back. "This is Captain Yu Jin of the Incheon's Pride," came a calm voice over the radio. "We're implementing Emergency Protocol 9, cutting power to affected sections and venting atmosphere." The human ship actually cut away the infected parts of itself, using explosive charges to separate the contaminated sections from the healthy parts. It was brutal and wasteful, but it worked. The swarm infection couldn't spread to the rest of the ship. The aliens couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans were willing to destroy parts of their own ships to save the whole. They fought with a combination of intelligence and desperation that the peaceful species had never imagined. "Admiral," reported Captain Hai-jin from her position at the rear of the formation, "my energy dampeners are having no effect on the swarm ships. Request permission to try physical weapons." The Altarian ships carried only non-lethal weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. But as Hye-jin watched the human ships fighting and dying, she realized that sometimes you needed to destroy your enemies to save your friends. "Permission granted," Admiral Dongwu replied. "All ships, weapons free. Do whatever it takes." The battle raged for 3 hours. Human ships were lost, their crews consumed or scattered into space, but for every human ship that fell, dozens of swarm vessels were destroyed. The humans fought with a fury that surprised even themselves. Finally, Admiral Dongwu gave the order that ended the battle. All ships, target the hive ships. Concentrated fire. Let's finish this. The combined fleet focused all their weapons on the 3 massive swarm vessels. Railgun rounds that could shatter moons, plasma torpedoes hot enough to melt steel, energy, beams that could carve through asteroids. All of it hammered into the alien ships. The hive ships tried to fight back, but they were designed for consuming planets, not fighting fleets. One by one they broke apart, their dark hulls cracking and bleeding strange fluids into space. When the last hive ship exploded, the remaining swarm fighters simply stopped moving. Without the controlling intelligence of the hive ships, they were just empty vessels drifting in space. The battle was over. The aliens had seen something they never thought possible: the complete destruction of a swarm force. "This is Admiral Dongwu to all ships," came the tired voice over the communication. "System, Kepler's gate is secure. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors." In the aftermath, as human ships pulled alien crew members from destroyed vessels, the peaceful species began to understand something important. The humans didn't fight because they loved violence. They fought because they loved everything else. Too much to let it be destroyed, and for the first time in the war, the aliens began to hope that they might actually win. The aftermath of Kepler's gate was unlike anything the aliens had ever witnessed. Commander Yu Jin of the damaged Incheon's Pride coordinated rescue operations from her partially destroyed bridge, her uniform torn and bloodied, but her voice steady and calm. "Search Team 3. We have life signs in Sector 7 of the Alterian cruiser Wisdom's Tear," she reported. "Hull breach in multiple sections. Recommend emergency atmospheric suits." Dr. Ne Yeun, the human chief medical officer, worked frantically in the emergency medical bay that had been set up on the Earth's Resolve. Around her, human medics treated wounded aliens with the same care they gave their own people, even though they had never seen these species before. "The Centauri physiology is similar to ours," she called to her assistant, Medic Jae-min, "but their blood chemistry is different. Increase the oxygen content in the breathing apparatus." Council Prime Wei-jun watched from his medical bed as human doctors worked to save his people. His left arm had been badly injured when his ship took a direct hit from swarm weapons, but the humans had stabilized him within minutes. "I don't understand," he said to Dr. Na Yun as she checked his vital signs. "An hour ago, your people were using weapons that could destroy planets. Now you're risking your lives to save ours." Dr. Na Yun looked at him with tired but kind eyes. "Those aren't different things, Honored Prime. We use those weapons so we can do this. But how can the same hands that destroy also heal? Because destroying and healing aren't opposites," Na-un explained as she worked. "Sometimes you have to destroy the thing that's hurting people before you can heal the people who were hurt." In another part of the medical bay, Lieutenant Haiwan was translating for the alien wounded, helping human medics understand what their patients needed. She had studied 12 different alien languages in preparation for this mission, but she had never expected to use them like this. "The Vegan in Bed 4 is asking about his shipmate," she told Dr. Min-soo. "They're bonded partners. If one dies, the other will follow." "Then we better make sure neither of them dies," Dr. Min-soo replied grimly, moving to check on both patients. Captain Hae-jin of the Serenity's Light found herself working alongside Commander Dong-jin of the Human Destroyer, Soul's Shield. They were coordinating the recovery of escape pods from destroyed ships, and she was amazed by how efficiently the humans worked. "How do you stay so calm?" she asked him as they watched. Human rescue ships pull survivors from the wreckage of her sister ship, the Peace of Stars. Training, Dongjin replied simply. We practice this kind of thing constantly. Search and rescue, medical operations, damage control. We prepare for the worst so we can handle it when it happens. But you also prepare for war. War is just another emergency, Dongjin said. Different tools, same principles. Save who you can, fix what you can, and never give up. Hye-jin watched human engineers working to repair her damaged ship. They had jury-rigged replacement systems using human technology, and they worked without regard for their own safety in the vacuum of space. Several times, human technicians had risked their lives to save alien crew members, trapped in damaged sections. Why? She asked. Why risk yourselves for us? Engineer Bo-Ra, who was welding a new support beam into place, paused in her work. Because that's what you do. You save people. It doesn't matter what species they are. The more the aliens watched, the more confused they became. These humans had just fought a battle of incredible violence, using weapons that could shatter worlds. But they showed the same intensity in saving lives that they had shown in taking them. On the bridge of the Earth's Resolve, Admiral Dongwu was debriefing with his alien counterparts. The tactical display showed the results of the battle. 17 human ships damaged or destroyed, 6 alien vessels lost, but 3 swarm hive ships eliminated. I don't understand your people, Council Prime Wei-jun said. His arm was in a sling, but he had insisted on attending the meeting. You fight with such brutality, but then you show such compassion. Those aren't opposites, Admiral Dongwu replied. We fight brutally because we love deeply. The more you care about something, the harder you'll fight to protect it. Representative Young-Soo from the Tao Seti Collective spoke up. But on my world, we believe that violence corrupts the soul. How can you use such terrible weapons and still remain good? Captain So Young of the Busan's Thunder answered. Because we remember what we're fighting for. Every time we pull the trigger, every time we launch a missile, we remember the people we're trying to save. But doesn't it change you? Doesn't the violence make you violent? Yes, So Young admitted. It does change us. Every battle leaves scars, not just on our bodies, but on our souls. But we accept those scars so that others don't have to. Dr. Su Jin, a Alterian scientist who had been studying human behavior, asked the question that puzzled her most. How do you decide when violence is necessary? How do you know when you should fight and when you should try to find peace? Humans looked at each other. This was something they had been thinking about for their entire history. We try peace first, Admiral Dongwu said finally. Always. But when someone threatens innocent life, when they won't listen to reason, when they leave us no choice, then we fight. But who decides? Who has the right to make that choice? We all do, replied Commander Eugene. Every human who picks up a weapon makes that choice, and we live with the consequences. The alien delegates spent hours asking questions. How could humans live with the knowledge that they had killed other beings? How could they build weapons designed only for destruction? How could they teach their children to fight while also teaching them to be kind? The answers were not simple. Humans explained that they didn't teach their children to love violence. They taught them to love things worth protecting. They didn't build weapons because they wanted to hurt people. They built them because sometimes hurting bad people was the only way to save good people. On Earth, explained Lieutenant Hei-Wan, we have a saying, peace through strength. It means that The best way to avoid war is to be strong enough to win one. But what if everyone thought that way? Asked Representative Mi Young. Wouldn't everyone just build bigger and bigger weapons until someone destroyed everything? That's why we also teach restraint, Admiral Dongwu said. Power without wisdom is dangerous. That's why humans volunteer for military service. We don't force people to fight. Only those who truly understand the cost of war should be allowed to wage it. As the debriefing ended, the aliens went back to their ships with new understanding. They had seen humans at their most violent and their most compassionate, often in the same moment. These beings could unleash terrible destruction, but they used that power only to protect, never to conquer. In her quarters, Captain Hye Jin recorded her observations for the Galactic Council. The humans are not what we thought, she said. They are not monsters who love violence. They are people who love peace so much that they are willing to fight for it. They accept darkness into their souls so that others can live in light. She paused, thinking about the human medics who had saved her crew, the engineers who had repaired her ship, the soldiers who had died protecting alien worlds they had never seen. I think, she continued, that this is what true strength looks like. Not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary, and the courage to bear the cost of that knowledge. Outside her window, human and alien ships worked together to repair the damage from the battle. Soon they would move on to the next system, the next fight. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of violence, they were simply people helping people. And maybe that was what made all the difference. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any meeting in their history. Instead of the usual calm discussions in their crystal halls, delegates crowded around holographic displays showing the nightmare approaching their capital. System. 15,000 ships, Admiral Dongwu reported grimly. Maybe more. Our long-range sensors can't get an exact count because they're packed so tightly together. Council Prime Wei Jun stared at the tactical display. The swarm fleet was massive beyond imagination, a dark cloud of living ships stretching across light years of space. Every vessel that had consumed human colonies, every hive ship that had devoured alien worlds, all of them were converging on the heart of galactic civilization. How is this possible? Asked Representative Young Min. We destroyed their forces at Kepler's Gate. We destroyed one battle group, corrected Captain Hye Jin. This is everything they have. Every ship, every bioconstruct, every spawning vessel. They're betting everything on this attack. Dr. Nayun studied the biological readings from their scout ships. The swarm isn't just attacking randomly anymore. They're acting with purpose, with intelligence. I think they know we can hurt them now, so they're trying to end the war quickly. Admiral Kyung-soo stepped forward. He was the commander of the Terran Strategic Fleet, and his ships carried humanity's most powerful weapons. We've been preparing for this possibility. Operation Righteous Thunder. He activated a new display that showed ship movements throughout human space. Massive vessels were moving toward the galactic core. Ships that dwarfed even the largest alien dreadnoughts. These are our heavy battleships, Kyung-soo explained. We built them after the first swarm attacks. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The aliens stared in shock at the human super battleships. The TDF Incheon's Wrath was 5 kilometers long and bristled with weapons they couldn't even identify. The TDF Gwangju's Pride carried missile batteries that could level continents. The TDF Seoul's Vengeance had guns that fired projectiles the size of buildings. Why did you build such things? Whispered Representative Su Jin. What could possibly require so much destruction? This, Admiral Kyung-soo said simply, pointing at the swarm fleet. We knew this day would come. Captain Bo Young commanded the flagship of the human super battleship fleet, the TDF Incheon's Wrath. Her ship was a city in space, carrying 50,000 crew members and enough weapons to fight an entire war. She had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of her career. The plan is simple, Admiral Kyung-soo explained to the combined fleet commanders. The swarm has a central coordination nexus somewhere in their fleet. If we can destroy it, the individual ships will lose their ability to work together. How do we find this nexus? Asked Captain Tae-hyung. We follow the communication patterns. Dr. Min-ho's team has been analyzing swarm signals for months. They think the nexus is one of the largest ships, probably heavily defended. Dr. Min-ho activated his research data. The swarm uses biological quantum entanglement for communication. Every ship is connected to every other ship, but the signals all flow through central nodes. We destroy the main node, we break their network. And if we're wrong? Asked Council Prime Wei-jun. Then we all die, Admiral Kyung-soo said bluntly. But if we don't try, we all die anyway. The plan required perfect coordination between human and alien forces. The alien ships would provide support and rescue operations, while the human fleet engaged the swarm directly. The super battleships would punch through to the center of the enemy formation and destroy the nexus. This is a suicide mission, observed Captain Hae-jin. Maybe, agreed Captain Bo Young. But someone has to do it. As the fleets prepared for battle, Engineer Yoo-jin worked frantically on the human ship's reactor systems. The plan required more power than the ships were designed to provide, and she was pushing every system to its limits. Are you sure these modifications will hold? Asked her Altarian counterpart, scientist Dal-soo. For about 20 minutes, Yoo-jin replied. After that, the reactors will overload and the ships will explode. Then why are you doing this? Because 20 minutes should be enough to reach the nexus and destroy it. Dal-soo was horrified. You're building the ships to self-destruct? We're building them to win, Yoo-jin corrected. If that means sacrificing the ships and crews, then that's what we do. The concept was incomprehensible to the peaceful aliens. They couldn't understand how humans could plan their own destruction so calmly, how they could volunteer for missions they knew would kill them. In the human fleet, the mood was different. Commander Jae-woo of the Gwangju's Pride recorded a message. For his family back on Earth, if you're watching this, it means we didn't make it back, he said calmly. But it also means we stopped the swarm. Your world is safe because we chose to fight. He paused, looking out at the stars through his cabin window. I want you to know that we didn't do this because we had to. We did it because we wanted to, because some things are worth dying for. Similar messages were being recorded throughout the human fleet. Soldiers writing last letters to their children, engineers leaving technical notes for their replacements, doctors making recordings for medical students who would never meet them. The aliens watched this preparation for sacrifice with growing amazement. These humans weren't being forced to fight. They were volunteering for almost certain death. They were doing it not for glory or conquest, but simply to protect others. I'm beginning to understand, Wei-jun said to Admiral Dong-woo as they watched the final preparations. Your people don't fight because they love war. They fight because they love everything else. Now you're learning, Dong-woo replied. The swarm fleet was only hours away from the galactic capital. On the beautiful worlds of the core systems, alien families looked up at the stars and wondered if they would see another sunrise. Their entire civilization depended on a species they had once called barbaric. But the humans were ready. Their ships were loaded with weapons that could crack planets. Their crews were prepared to sacrifice everything. Their leaders had planned for this moment since the first swarm attack. "All ships, this is Admiral Kyung-soo," came the final announcement. "Today we face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. Some of us won't see tomorrow, but because of what we do today, others will see many tomorrows." He paused, looking out at the massive fleet of human and alien ships. "For Earth, for the innocent, for all that's sacred in this universe. Let's end this." The fleet moved forward into the darkness, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. Behind them were worlds full of children who had never known war. Ahead of them was an enemy that would consume everything if they failed. The humans checked their weapons one last time and prepared to show the universe what they were truly capable of. Win or lose, this battle would be remembered forever. The final confrontation was about to begin. The battle for the galactic core began with silence. The combined human and alien fleet hung in space before the most beautiful sight in the galaxy, the crystal cities of the Alterian homeworld, floating in orbit around their ancient sun. Behind them, the gas giant Serenity held the Galactic Council chambers, where 47 species had lived in peace for millions of years. And approaching through the darkness came the swarm. Captain Jae-woo stood on the bridge of the flagship, Gwangju's pride watching the enemy fleet fill his tactical displays. 15,000 ships of living nightmare, their dark hulls pulsing with alien energy. At their center, the largest bioconstruct ever seen, a ship the size of a small planet covered in spines and feeding tentacles. "That's the Nexus," reported his science officer, Lieutenant Da-young. "The signals are all flowing through that central ship." "Then that's our target," Jae-woo said calmly. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. These men and women knew they were probably going to die in the next hour, but their hands were steady and their voices calm. They had volunteered for this mission because someone had to do it. Admiral Kyung-soo's voice came over the fleet communication system. "All ships, form defensive wall around the homeworld. Alien vessels, begin evacuation procedures for the civilian population. Human fleet, prepare to engage." The battle began exactly as planned. The swarm hit the human defensive line like a dark tide, billions of small fighters swarming around the larger ships. The humans met them with everything they had: railgun, fire, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic weapons that lit up space like artificial stars. Captain Bo-young commanded the super battleship Incheon's Wrath from its massive bridge. Her ship alone carried more firepower than most entire fleets, and she used every weapon as the swarm closed in. "Target the large hive ships," she ordered. "Don't let them get close to the planet." Her main guns fired rounds the size of buildings, each one moving at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit the swarm vessels, the alien ships simply disintegrated, torn apart by forces no living thing was meant to endure. But for every swarm ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy had committed everything to this battle, and their numbers seemed endless. On the bridge of the Serenity's light, Captain Hae-jin coordinated the evacuation of civilian populations. Her ship and the other alien vessels were pulling families from the orbital cities, carrying them to safety in the outer system. "Captain, the human line is taking heavy casualties," reported her communications officer, Tae-min. Hee-jin could see it on her displays. Human ships were dying, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The destroyer Soul's Hammer disappeared in a ball of dark energy. the cruiser Busan's Thunder rammed a hive ship rather than let it reach the planet. "They're sacrificing themselves for us," she whispered. Behind the defensive line, Admiral Dongwu prepared the final phase of the battle plan. The super battleships had fought their way halfway to the swarm nexus, but they were taking massive damage. Soon, they would be destroyed. "All ships, implement Protocol Omega," he ordered. Throughout the human fleet, engineers began the final modifications to their reactor systems. Dr. Yujin worked frantically on the Guangzhou's Pride, her hands flying over control panels as she pushed the ship's power systems beyond their safety limits. "Reactors at 150% capacity," she reported. "We have maybe 10 minutes before cascade failure." "Then we better make them count," Captain Jay-Woo replied. The human ships surged forward with their final burst of power, burning through their own systems to reach maximum velocity. They smashed through the swarm formation like bullets through paper, leaving trails of destroyed alien vessels in their wake. Captain Bo Young's Inchen's Wrath led the charge toward the massive Nexus ship. Her vessel was already dying. Its hull, cracked and bleeding atmosphere, but her weapons were still firing. "All remaining ships, follow my lead," she broadcast. "One last push." The Nexus ship fought back with weapons that defied understanding. Beams of pure entropy that aged metal to dust in seconds. Gravitational fields that crushed ships like tin cans. Living missiles that burrowed into hulls and consumed them from the inside. But the humans kept coming. The cruiser Taekwondo's Edge sacrificed itself to clear a path for the larger ships. The battleship Soul's Vengeance used its dying moments to destroy the Nexus ship's outer defenses. One by one, the human vessels threw themselves against the swarm's ultimate weapon. Finally, only 3 ships remained: the Guangzhou's Pride, the Incheon's Wrath, and the heavily damaged destroyer Busan's Hope. They were less than a kilometer from the Nexus ship now, close enough to see the alien structures writhing on its surface. "This is it," Captain Jay-Woo announced to his crew. "Final attack run. It's been an honor serving with you all." The 3 ships opened fire with everything they had left. Their weapons carved deep wounds in the Nexus ship's hull, exposing the biological systems beneath. But it wasn't enough. The alien vessel was too large, too well defended. "Sir," reported Dr. Yujin, "reactors are reaching critical mass. We have maybe 30 seconds before they overload." Jay-Woo looked at his crew one last time. These brave men and women had followed him into certain death without question. Now they would all die together. "Send a message to the fleet," he ordered. Tell them we were honored to serve." But before he could give the final order, something unexpected happened. The alien ships that had been evacuating civilians suddenly appeared alongside the human vessels. Captain Haijin's Serenity's Light led a formation of 12 Alterian ships, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. "This is Captain Haijin to all human vessels," came her voice over the radio. "You taught us that some things are worth fighting for. Now let us fight beside you." The alien ships opened fire with weapons they had never used in anger before. Their energy beams, designed for peaceful purposes, proved surprisingly effective against swarm biotechnology. More importantly, their presence gave the dying human ships the support they needed for one final push. Together, human and alien vessels poured everything they had into the Nexus ship. The massive bioconstruct began to crack under the sustained assault, its alien intelligence screaming in frequencies that hurt to hear. "All reactors reaching critical mass," Yujin reported. 10 seconds to overload." Jay-Woo made his final decision. "All ships, prepare for reactor overload. May our sacrifice protect those we love." the human fleet's reactors went critical all at once, creating a chain reaction of nuclear fire that spread across space like a second sun. The energy release was beyond anything ever seen in galactic history, enough power to boil away planets, to burn the very fabric of space clean. The Swarm Nexus ship caught at the center of the explosion simply ceased to exist. The alien intelligence that had controlled billions of vessels across the galaxy was snuffed out in an instant. Without their controlling mind, the swarm ships began to drift aimlessly. Their perfect coordination was gone, their unified purpose shattered. Within minutes, the dark fleet was nothing but debris floating in space. From her position at the edge of the system, Captain Hyojin watched the light of the human sacrifice fade into normal starlight. The nuclear fire had consumed everything at the center of the battle: the swarm nexus, the human super battleships, and the brave crews who had chosen to die for others. "The swarm fleet is breaking apart," reported her science officer. "No organized resistance. The remaining ships are just drifting." Hyojin nodded, unable to speak. She was watching something sacred, the moment when an entire species had chosen to sacrifice everything for the survival of strangers. Council Prime Wei Jun's voice came over the communication system from the planet below. "The evacuation is complete. All civilian populations are safe." He paused, his voice heavy with emotion. "The humans, did they?" "They're gone," Hyojin said quietly. "All of them, but so is the swarm." In the days that followed, the surviving alien vessels searched through the debris of the battle. They found pieces of human ships, fragments of alien biotechnology, and the slowly expanding cloud of radioactive gas that marked the site of the greatest sacrifice in galactic history. But they also found something else: emergency pods, scattered throughout the battlefield. Some of the human crew members had survived, protected by their ship's final act of love. Not many, perhaps a few hundred out of the 50,000 who had fought. But enough. Dr. Ne Yun was found floating in a medical pod that had been ejected from the Earth's resolve seconds before the ship's destruction. When they brought her aboard the Serenity's light, her first words were about her patients. "The wounded aliens from Kepler's Gate," she said weakly. "Are they safe?" "They're all safe," Hyojin assured her, "because of what you did. Because of what all of you did." In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. The alien species began to understand that peace was not the absence of conflict. It was something that had to be protected. Sometimes with violence, always with sacrifice. They built monuments to the human fleet on every world, crystal sculptures that captured the light of stars and turned it into rainbows. They told stories of the species that had chosen to die rather than let evil triumph. But the greatest monument was the galaxy itself. Billions of worlds where children grew up in safety, where artists create,